What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Around the NHL episode 6. In this episode, we are going to be analyzing the Las Vegas Golden Knights roster. Now, they had just picked their roster. We had the expansion draft, obviously, and this video is going to cover kind of an analysis on who they have as of right now, as of this recording. I'll talk about who they picked from everybody, but they've already traded away 2 defensemen in the process. So, we're going to talk about where they kind of stand right now, where I maybe think they're going to be going, not just in this year, but in the future. So, this expansion draft kind of went how people had expected it going up to it. Now, when I made the mock draft, I had said that there's going to be all these deals taking place, all these side deals, and my expansion draft, my mock draft, was purely based on who I would pick as the best player. This is without any deals going down with any team. And honestly, as it stands, the team that I picked would have probably, firstly, it's a much better team than what Vegas actually has. And it is a team that can definitely compete for the playoffs. Now, the Vegas team that they actually have is a team that is very, very spotty for this year. And I think that is a problem and maybe a good thing for Vegas. What they have is so many draft picks, and I do mean so many draft picks. They have picks going years into the future. They have 3 first-rounders this year, 3 second-rounders. They got 3 second-rounders in 2019, multiple picks all throughout. So, especially in this year, they got 3 first-round picks in the top 15 and 6 picks within the top 60. They are going to be a team to watch in the future. As of right now, I'd say over the next 2 years, I don't expect much from Las Vegas. These first-round picks that they have this year will become impact players, but probably not until 2 years at the earliest. But obviously they're going towards the future. They've picked interesting range of players. They don't have like I'd honestly say they don't have the worst team in the league. I'd say immediately they've passed some teams in this league. Teams like Arizona, Vancouver, Colorado, and probably New Jersey. I think they've passed some of the bottom feeders of the league. I really think they've done that, even with this team. And why? Well, I think let's start with goalies. Let's start with the goalies that obviously they were going to get strong goalies no matter what they did with the expansion draft. They could have gone after Linus Ullmark of Buffalo. They steered clear of him, but they got Marc-Andre Fleury. Obviously, we all knew that was going to happen. He's a number 1 starting goaltender. He's very good. I don't think he's one of the best in the league. He had an iffy year this year. He did pretty well in the playoffs until Murray dethroned him again. But he played very well in the playoffs this year for what he played. He obviously is a very good goalie. He's got 2 years left on his deal. He's their number 1 starting goalie. It's a great pick. And then they got Calvin Pickard from Colorado, and he's a pretty decent goalie. In fact, he could even be a fringe starting goalie on certain teams in this league. And so to have him as the backup and then have Berube as the third goalie, they have a very, very solid goalie core. For now and for the future, really, I think. Defensemen, they're still very strong, actually. I like some of the defensemen they've picked, and that's with them trading players like Trevor Van Riemsdyk. They traded him to Carolina. They traded Colin Miller of Boston. They traded him to Toronto. So they had 2 players that are not even there anymore. And they could have gotten more defensemen. They backed off of Minnesota. They could have taken some defensemen there. They obviously could have taken some defensemen from Anaheim, but they did technically get a defenseman. So defenseman-wise, you got Mark Mathot. And again, this is who is still there as of time of recording. Now, Mathot, I do think, is going to be traded to another team. But as of right now, he's a Las Vegas Golden Knight. Mathot, he'll get them draft picks or prospects or whatever they want to try and get for him. He's a very decent defenseman. He played with Carlson for a large majority of this year. He is a pretty solid defenseman. I'd want him on my team. Jason Garrison, who played really well in Vancouver, has not played so well in Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay kind of had them choose Garrison. You got Alexei Yemelin of Montreal, again, kind of a player that I wouldn't have picked. In my draft, I picked Brandon Davidson, and Actually, ironically, the rumor has it that's who Vegas wanted, that's who they were targeting, and then Montreal had them take Yemelin. He's a decent defenseman that I think will also get traded. So really right now, of those top three, I see Garrison as the only one that stays beyond the next couple weeks. Lucas Spiza of Vancouver, I picked him as well. I do like him. He'll definitely stay a Golden Knight, I think. Clayton Stoner. Now this was obviously part of their deal to lay off Vatanen and or Manson. So they took Clayton Stoner, but they also got Shea Theodore, who is insanely good, very, very good young defenseman. He is arguably their best prospect at the moment, I think. I would definitely give him the best prospect award. They'll get a lot of, like I said, they'll get so many prospects with the draft. So they'll start stocking up with young players, both offense and defense. But Theodore is probably their best, highest ceiling player as of right now. They got Braden McNabb of Los Angeles, who I said that's who I picked as well. I like him. He's a decent defenseman. He could play. He will play in the NHL this year with them. John Merrill of New Jersey. He's a guy who I don't know why I didn't pick him for my New Jersey one. I do like him. I do think he's good. You got Derek England of Calgary. He's not good. He's pretty terrible. They gave him an extension. Obviously, a side deal was worked out there. Griffin Reinhart of Edmonton. He's a good pick, I think. He's young. He's been a bust so far. But I think that you could take a flyer on him and see what he can do. Maybe, I feel like they'll have success with him. I feel like he has time, a little bit more time. He's 23, but I think he has time to grow in his role. He's not going to be on the NHL roster this year, I'll tell you that right now with Vegas, unless he earns it. He's got to earn it, but I just don't see a spot. And then Nate Schmidt of Washington. This is instead of Grubauer, who I think is a way better goalie than Pickard or Berube, so obviously, I would have taken Grubauer, but Nate Schmidt is a solid player. I do think he would make the team over Reinhart. And then forwards, they got a mix of players that are not going to play in the NHL and players that are. Some younger players that they didn't make. They got William Carrier from Buffalo. They got Alex Touch from Minnesota in that deal that had them lay off, probably selecting Dumba or Scandella. They got, and Touch is very good, and Carrier is a solid player too. They got a couple other younger, low ceiling forwards we're not going to really talk about. So let's talk about some of the bigger things that they did. They got David Clarkson from Columbus. Now this is big because, taking that salary off of Columbus's hands, taking the contract really, because he can be put on long-term IR. Taking that off of them is a big favor. Obviously, they were rewarded because they did get another player. They got William Karlsson, and they got a draft pick from Columbus. So overall, it worked out pretty well. They got a good young forward. They got a second-round pick in a couple of years from Columbus, and they got to take on Clarkson's contract, which kind of sucks. They got James Neal of Nashville. He is a solid player. He's very good. Obviously, he had a low year this year. I think he becomes one of their best offensive players. I think he is on their first line. I think he's a guy they look to score in this upcoming year. He's got 1 year left on his deal, and that's kind of the case with a lot of these players. Is they only have 1 year left. Very, very few players. Mathot has more than that. They signed Eric Holla of Minnesota, and they gave him multiple years. They have Cody Eakin, Riley Smith. They have some players, and so they have a couple players, but a lot of them do end within a year or two, which is something that, they'll obviously rely on younger players that they're going to start drafting, and they're going to expect them to come in and really take over, which I think is a smart strategy. You got Mikhail Grabovski of New York Islanders. Obviously, this was a deal as well. This was a help out by them. Obviously, he's on long-term IR as well, so there's not much you can say about him. Riley Smith of Florida. Now, Florida did some stupid things yesterday. As of recording, they did some stupid things. Like I said, Riley Smith, a young 26-year-old player. He's got 5 years left on his deal. He scores. He's a very good offensive player. He's a lot of money, though. He's $5 million for the next 5 years. That is a lot of money. But he's young and he scores. And Florida said that they were looking for cap space. cap relief, really, and that championships are won off of defense. Now, that's kind of true, sure, but you do need to score. And Florida has a lot of problems right now, just in general. I don't know why you would trade Riley Smith. They also lost Jonathan Marchessault, who was a breakout player this year, who got, over 30 goals this year. Insanely high shooting percentage for sure. Maybe he doesn't keep that up, but even if he scores 20 goals, 20 goal scorers are insanely hard to find in the NHL nowadays, and he's one of them. And it's a $750,000 contract. He becomes an unrestricted free agent next year. What a pickup on Florida. Like, they robbed them blind. You got Shipachyov. Obviously, he wasn't in the draft. They already drafted him previously. I like him. I think he'll be given the chance to be their #1 center. In fact, I think he has to be because they really don't have centers behind him that can be #1 centers anyway. Cody Eakin of Dallas, very strong, very two-way kind of player. He's got several years left. Eric Howell, like I said. Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, he is solid. He's got a couple years left. Obviously, there were some things going on there with Philadelphia. He's not the guy I would have picked. Carlson, we talked about. Marchessault, we talked about. Chris Thorburn, they picked a guy who is old, very old, is an unrestricted free agent, so they'd have to sign him, which I don't think they will. But they did get Winnipeg's first-round pick this year. They got a lot of draft picks to try and lay off of other players. Not only did they not pick good players, but they didn't even pick decent players. They picked a player with a contract expiring. This is not the pick I would have thought that they would have taken from Winnipeg, but again, they got a lot of draft picks for this, so in a way, this benefits Vegas long-term. Oscar Lindberg of the Rangers, solid player. A restricted free agent, they'll have to sign him. Timu Polkinen, he's been in a lot of different places. He hasn't exactly worked out. Still somewhat young at 25. He's a guy who could make the team, I think. So that's the team. That's their roster. They have some work to do. Firstly, they have too many defensemen. And too many defensemen, even with trading people, you're only going to need around 7 to 8 defensemen, and they're going to have to figure out who stays in the NHL and who goes to the AHL. Goalies are completely fine on. Obviously, they'll need to sign some depth players. They'll need to get some AHL kind of talent. They'll need to get, they'll be active in the free agent pool when it opens up on July 1st. Forward-wise, they'll need to work on this because with Clarkson and Grabowski on IR, they have 9 forwards. And so they're going, and that is with everybody accounted for. If you sign Thorburn, Lindberg, and Polkinen, now obviously you do have some of the other players like Reed Duke, Alex Touch, like I said, although I don't think he's going to be playing for them, Carrier, Nosek, and a couple others, Connor Brickley, a few other players. They do have a couple of younger forwards, but they're going to need to go into the unrestricted free agent market, maybe sign a Brian Boyle, maybe sign a couple of wingers, maybe some older wingers. They're not going to have a good offense. Here's my analysis, like I said, for Vegas. They've got a solid goalie core. I think they're completely fine goalie-wise. Defensive-wise, they're not even that bad. They've got okay people. Spiza, McNabb, I'm assuming again they lose Mathot and Yemelin. They got Garrison, Spiza, McNabb, Merrill. They've got some good players. Stoner is, I guess you could put him as the 6th defenseman. He's a terrible player. I don't like him at all. But they do have some good enough players. Theodore could easily become a top 4 defenseman with them this year. So they've got a solid defense that's going to do okay. It's probably going to be in the bottom half of the league for sure. They've got no elite defensemen. They got no top 1 or top 2 defensemen. I don't even know if they have a top 3 defenseman. So they need an elite defenseman, which they could get with their pick. They have the 6th overall pick at the draft. They could do it with that pick. They could get an elite defenseman. Forward-wise, they are in some trouble. They've got a couple scorers like Neal and Shipachyov, Carlson, Marchessault, Riley Smith. They can make an average top 6. A top 6 that is not going to be good, but a top 6 that can be okay. They'll score goals, but they have no superstar there. They don't have one. James Neal used to be, but I wouldn't consider him one now. They got some good two-way players. Cody Eakin, Eric Howell, solid players. Oscar Lindberg. Their team is going to be okay at best. I think their team could maybe be 8th, 9th, 10th worst in the league. So maybe finish somewhere around 22nd to 18th, and that could be a stretch. That could actually be giving them too much credit. Depends on how much Fleury and the defense can carry them. Depends on what they do in the offseason, like I said. Depends on maybe if they take all 3 first-round picks and try and move up to 3 or 4. Get as good of a player as you can possibly get in the draft. Have that player play for them this year. That would add some much-needed help, but I don't think they're going to do that. I think their goal is to just accumulate all these draft picks. Like I said, 6 in the first 2 rounds. By the end of this 3-year stretch, they're going to have a ton of young players. And if they have an okay, even if they have an okay amateur scouting division, they'll be okay because they'll have to hit with some of these players. Even if you hit with 3 of the 6 in the top 2 rounds this year, that's 3 players you can add to your roster within the next year or 2. So they're going to be okay down the line. Will they be winning a lot over the next 2 years? No. And could that be a problem with a new expansion team? Yeah. I thought that they would do a mix of what they did. I thought they would take deals but also try and be smarter and maybe just not take deals. Go with the best player available. They let teams get their way out of things, which, credit to George McPhee, he said that teams would have the option to trade their way basically out of losing whatever player they were going to get picked from. So every team had a chance, and teams took advantage. I mean, Vegas made a lot of deals. They could have had like a Jack Johnson of Columbus. He was unprotected. They could have had a really good. They could have had Matt Dumba or Marco Scandella from Minnesota. They could have had Sammy Vatanen from Anaheim. There's 3 defensemen right there that are very, very good. All 3 of them are better than any of the defensemen that they have right now, including, I'd even argue, Theodore. So they could have been better. Forward-wise, they were never going to get good forwards. The good forwards of the league were just all protected. It's defense that teams had trouble and struggled to protect. And forwards, most forwards of most teams were protected. So forward-wise, they were never going to be good, but you do kind of win. You do kind of win in this league based on defense and goalie. So they could have had a chance this season with a good defense and good goalie core. They have a good goalie core. They have a decent defense, and they have a bad forward group. We'll see how they do this year. I cannot wait to see them. Even though this is not the team I envisioned when they were first announced, I want to see them play. I want to see this kind of collection of all these forwards from all these different teams. It'll be cool to see how they mesh. That's, I think, going to be the most exciting part. That's what I liked about Florida back in, I think, 2011, 2012, when they just got all the rejects of the league and made the playoffs, surprised everybody. It was all these players from all these different teams grouping together, basically, in a way, an expansion draft, because literally they signed, 11 or 12 free agents. This is like that, only to a new extreme, and so I cannot wait to see them. Let me know what you guys thought of the Las Vegas picks. Let me know if any of the players that they chose that you liked, didn't like, what they were going to do in the offseason. We can talk about it. We'll have another Around the NHL episode either after the draft, preparing for free agency. We'll probably do that right after the draft. We'll talk about the draft, and we'll preview the free agent market, and then we'll talk about free agency when that comes. So let me know anything you guys want to talk about NHL-wise. Make sure you subscribe to Podcast Now, our YouTube channel, for more content. Like and share this video, and I will see you guys on the next episode of Around the NHL.